Okay, so just a refresher on the diamond. We're rationalizing denominators. I already started, but it's fine. I'll explain it. Okay, so I want you to realize that when you're at the top and the bottom of the diamond, you have an even exponent, and it can equal -1 or +1. When you have an odd exponent, it equals I or -I. So we are not allowed to have i's in the denominator. So when they're an odd exponent, you can multiply it by I one more time and make it even. So I times I came into I squared, but what you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So we get 3I over 2I squared. Well, I squared equals -1. And 2 times -1 is just -2. There's your answer. So on example 2, we have an odd exponent for I, correct? So I can multiply it by what? I. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So if I have 7 there and I multiply it by 1 more, what do I get? I to the 8th power over 7I. Well, I want you to realize, if I come over here and I do 8 divided by 4, that gives me 2 as a whole number. 8 divided by 4 is 2. If I make that a decimal, it's 0.0. 0.0 equals what? 1. So now my denominator equals 1. Well, 7I divided by 1 is just 7I, and there's my answer. Always by 4, because there's 4 options.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at example 3. So again, we have an odd exponent. So I'm going to multiply by I. And I get -4I over 10I to the 6th. Because remember, you just add exponents when you're multiplying. So 5 plus 1 is 6. Now, I to the 6th. So I'm going to do 6 divided by 4. And that equals 1.5. So my remainder is 0.5, which tells me what? It equals -1. So I end up with -4I over 10 times -1. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, what is 10 times -1? So I get -4I over -10. 2 negatives makes a, so I know it's 4I over 10. And what does that simplify to? Yeah, I can divide both of these by 2, and I end up with 2I over 5. Now we're not going to actually solve number 4. It's just there to talk about it. So in our last unit, what would we do when there was a binomial in the denominator to cancel? Huh?
Separate them.
No. What are you saying? Get rid of it. How? Starts with a C. The conjugate. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So you multiply by the opposite of the denominator, but what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Okay? So this is just a reminder for the conjugate. Anytime there's a plus or a minus on the bottom. Okay, because that's like the problems from our last unit, correct? So now flip over. What do you notice about these 3 problems? Yeah, we have i's on the bottom, and we also have plus or minuses on the bottom, which means we need to do the conjugate just like we did before, but now it's with i's instead of roots, yes? So what's the conjugate of 2 minus I? 2 plus I. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 2 plus I. Now, I don't know if you remember me telling y'all, but always multiply the top last. Yes? Because if it simplifies, you don't want to multiply it in to take it right back out. Okay, so let's double distribute the bottom. So 2 times 2 is what? 2 times positive I is positive 2I. Negative I times 2 is negative 2I. And negative I times positive I is negative I squared. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep simplifying this. I know that positive 2I minus 2I are like terms and they cancel each other. I also know that I squared is negative 1. So now in my denominator I have 4 minus negative 1. 2 negatives makes a. So when I do this, I get 5. So my denominator equals 5. Well, before I even keep going, I don't know why I did that. What happens? Don't distribute it. It cancels. And my answer is 2 plus I. That's why I tell y'all to always wait. Because what if it cancels? Do you really want to do all that work to take it right back out? No. So let's look at example 6. What am I going to multiply by? No.
2 plus 6i?
2 plus 6i. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. That's what keeps it equal. And we're going to distribute. So again, I like to do the bottom first. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times positive 6i is positive 12i. Negative 6i times 2 is negative 12i. And negative 6i times positive 6i, well, negative times a positive is a negative. 6 times 6 is 36. I times I is I squared. What's that?
Just checking the fire alarm real quick.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Any questions with that? Well, if we did it right, our middle two terms should do what? Cancel. Do they? Yes. And I get 4 minus 36, and what does I squared equal? Negative 1. Because remember, this equals negative 1, and we're multiplying.
Ms. Cartledge,
Yes.
should those two always cancel?
In your denominator, yes. That's the whole point of us doing the conjugate. So again, you can do this one step at a time on your own, or you can type it in your calculator. 4 minus 36 times negative 1 equals 40. Okay, well 40 doesn't simplify with any of these, so we can go ahead and now multiply the top. So 3 times 2, 6. 3 times positive 6i is positive 18i. Negative 2i times 2 is negative 4i. And negative 2i times positive 6i. Well, negative 2 times 6 is what? Negative 12. And I times I is I squared. So our middle two terms are alike. Do they cancel each other? No. So I have this 6. What's 18i minus 4i? Positive 14i. And then I have this minus 12 times I squared, which is negative 1. Well, I can combine like terms here, which is this. And I have 6 minus 12 times negative 1, which gives me 18. So I have 18 plus 14i. Does that simplify? Yeah, they're all even numbers, so I know they can simplify by what? 2. So I'm going to divide the whole top and the whole bottom by 2. And what does that give me?
9 plus 7i.
Over 20. The top two numbers are prime, therefore it does not simplify any further, because they don't go into the denominator. Any questions with that? Okay, let's look at example 7. So what am I going to multiply top and bottom by? 5 minus I square root 3. Five times 5 is 25. 5 times negative I square root 3 is negative 5I square root 3. Positive I square root 3 times 5 is positive 5I square root 3. Now positive I times negative I, we'll freeze. Take this one at a time. Positive times a negative is a negative. I times I is I squared. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 3 squared. Right, James? So if we did it right, our middle two terms are like, and what do they do? Do they cancel? Yes. So we end up with 25 minus, because of this, what does I squared equal?
-1.
And doesn't this square root cancel this squared, so we just have 3?
Yeah.
Yes. Which equals, our calculator's our best friend, 25 minus -1 times 3, which is 28. Now 28 doesn't simplify with anything there, so we're going to go ahead and distribute the top as well. Now I want you to realize they're exactly the same, except this time they're both negative, so nothing's going to cancel. So 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times negative I root 3 is negative 5I root 3. Negative I root 3 times 5 is negative 5I root 3. Two negatives makes a
Positive.
I times I is I squared. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 3 squared. Our middle two terms should be alike, are they? What's negative 5I square root of 3 minus 5I square root of 3? No. We're not multiplying. Negative 10I square root of 3. And then we have plus I squared, which is negative 1. And then we have the square root cancels the squared, which is 3. So now we pay attention to our like terms. So I'm going to type that in my calculator. 25 plus, parentheses, -1, 3, which gives me 22. Does this simplify? Yeah, I can divide everything again by 2. And I get what?
11 minus 5 is going to be
Over 14.